The result of the Danish phase is horrific defeat. The armies of the Catholic Empire are on the move northward. And at this point in the conflict, the emperor issues the Edict of Restitution. The Edict of Restitution says that all Catholic Church lands from before the Protestant Reformation will be restored to the Catholic Church. So all church lands that the Catholic Church once had will now be restored to the Catholic Church. Now, this is happening from 1618 on to 1648, or 30 years. So this is happening a full century after the Protestant Reformation began in 1517. In other words, you have areas that have never had Catholic. People have lived there, and their parents have lived there, and their grandparents have lived there, and they've never been Catholic. They've never seen Catholic things. However, the churches in those areas were former Catholic churches that were reformed during the Protestant Reformation. But the emperor, with the Edict of Restitution, throws out the Peace of Augsburg. The Deus Regio, Eius Religio, no. Catholic Church lands will be restored to the Catholic Church across the empire. And so once again, this is not just a sign of the Catholic victories early on, but this is a sign of the emperor consolidating his power. The empire issuing an edict over the entire empire. Now the question is, can he enforce it? And at this point, once again, we've got the Swedish army of Gustavus Adolphus invading from the north, funded partly by the French, who get involved later. And so the Swedes will join with the northern Protestant princes, funding with the French, and so they will be able to stop the imperial Catholic armies in what's the Swedish phase, the third phase. Now Gustavus Adolphus dies, but this is a crucial turning point in the conflict. And then, after the death of Gustavus Adolphus, the conflict continues, and at this point the French get involved. And so the French, the Catholic French, invade and to try to fight against the Habsburg Emperor. Now, at this point, if you remember, the Habsburgs in two different branches of the family control the Holy Roman Empire and also Spain, right? There's another Habsburg branch in Spain. So the Habsburgs in Spain now get involved and they attack France. It's not just because they're related by family, but also religion. Spain is Catholic, and, you know, even though the French are Catholic too, the French are fighting on the Protestant side in the 30 Years' War. So at that point, then, the war, it's outside even the boundaries of the Holy Roman Empire itself. Now, the ultimate result is, obviously, it's just chaos, and it just grinds, it's grinding each side down. And so, finally, in 1648, the Peace of Westphalia is the result. Question?
Who was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire?
I don't know. There's several during this time, so
okay.
yeah. These names, yeah, sometimes.
So we don't need to know specifically, just...
Yeah, I don't... I mean, you could move. I've never put that brain power aside for like that one. Charles V is the one from early in the conflict, battling Francis I. But you know, I think there's just a series of emperors, none of which are ruling for very long. So I've never there's not sort of that dynamic 3-decade-long leader that sort of you know is worth remembering, at least for me. So. What is this Peace of Westphalia? Okay, so we've got a reiteration of the Peace of Augsburg's Deus Regio, Eius Religio, or whose region, his religion, except this time we have Calvinism. But also, very importantly, the Treaty of Westphalia gives all of the princes sovereignty over their territories. Every area in the Holy Roman Empire, and there's nearly 300 different areas now, principalities, other free cities and free towns, all of them with their own control. And so they have the power to make laws, to have armies, they have their own diplomats or ambassadors moving around, they create their own tariffs, they choose their own religion, and there is no imperial army for the entire empire, right? If the Holy Roman Emperor wants to go to war, he needs to convince everyone else to join him, right? And so, basically, for all intents and purposes, 1648 and the 30 Years' War destroys the unity of the Holy Roman Empire. After 1648, it will be a name, Holy Roman Empire, but it will not be a political entity of any importance. So therefore, with the German Empire weak and decentralized, the center of power will now be France, which at this very moment is centralizing under the leadership of Cardinal Richelieu, and then, in the second half of the century, the absolutism of Louis XIV. And so we'll see a balance of power shift from the center of Europe to the West. This is not just happening because of this political dynamics and the religious turmoil, but it's also happening because the West also is growing stronger because of its economic trade, the opening of the Atlantic, and its ability to take advantage of Atlantic sea trade. Now, with the Holy Roman Empire weak and decentralized, the Habsburg Emperor now looks out and sees that he has a much smaller kingdom. And so the Austrian Habsburgs now will look to expand their empire east. And so they'll create this new Austrian Empire, battling the Turks in the east to defeat the Turks and move into Hungary and into the southern Slav areas, right, where many Serbians live and many Romanians live, and into areas where Poles live. And so the Austrian Empire, the territory that the Austrian Habsburgs control, will now be moving east. And very importantly for our history, that territory will not be full of Germans. It will be full of all sorts of different ethnicities, which will mean there won't be a strong national identity in that empire.